Welcome to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. My name is Ben Smith. Allow me to introduce the Maine Savings Amphitheater to my Thompson's Point, Curtis Wister. How are you doing today, Curtis?
All right. I'm doing well, Ben. We're getting into summer here. We got some concerts rolling in. I like the theme here.
Yep. So we like rocking and rolling here on this show. And again, one thing that talk about rocking and rolling on episode 48, we had Kim Dorsky on and discussing how to right size our stuff as we age, and
that's right.
Got to rock and roll towards getting our house cleaned out here. So the concept is really about being mindful about what we own. How does it fit into our living space as we age? And then finding a way to part with items that no longer serve a purpose for us. Mm-hmm. So, of course, once we decide to part with our things, or maybe our relatives haven't gone through that process, how do we get the most value from them?
Yeah.
Better yet, what about the collections that we've been obsessed over during our lives? What do we do with those? Isn't that why people have estate sales, just to get rid of things all at once? So those are just some of the many questions our clients have come to us about. They're seeking an expert in the vintage and antique marketplace about the tips, tricks, and hacks we can all use to get the most value from our things. Right. So with that, that's the premise of today's show.
That's right. And, as you know, Ben, and hopefully our listeners know, we're not the experts in everything. So we had to pull someone in here.
That's right.
So on our show today, we have someone that in 1988 set off on an antique odyssey. So from 1990 to 1998, he and his business partner, Jeffrey Nelson, operated the Wrigleyville Antique Mall, which was one of the first modern multi-dealer vintage stores in Chicago. So after tens of thousands of sales, countless fails, and the revelation of too many startling stories to tell in a single night of vintage debauchery, our guest wrote Selling Dead People's Things, which documents a slice of those early years of vintage retailing. Selling Dead People's Things is a wry, behind the curtain peek into the world of antiques and their obsessive owners while still alive and after their passing. So, an amusing observer of the human condition, our guest entertains in 25 life-illuminating, scary, sad, or frightfully funny resale tales and essays. You can't just say to the bereaved, "I'm sorry for your loss, but are those crucifixes for sale?" Of course, you could say that, but it's more important probably how you say it. Mm-hmm. So
that's right.
Whether processing the estate of a hoarding bookkeeper, disassembling the retro remains of an infamous haunted hospital, or conducting an impromptu appraisal during a Shiva gone disturbingly wrong, every day is a twisted treasure hunt for this 21st century antiques dealer. While digging deep into the basements, attics, and souls of the most interesting collectors imaginable, traveling from one odd house call to the curious next, resale predicaments will confound your every turn. So today, our guest currently and his partner Jeff own the Broadway Antique Market, which is home to 75 top dealers. It's Chicago's largest multi-dealer shopping destination, and every bit the vintage department store they had hoped it could become. For collectors of mid-century design, BAM is a mini modern mecca. For others, it's a fun place to idle away an afternoon, people watch, or try not to buy something. Mm-hmm. So at this point, please welcome Dwayne Scott Cerny to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. Dwayne, thank you so much for spending your time today with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hey, Ben. Hey, Curtis.
Hey. Well, Dwayne, we're in Maine. You're in Chicago. So what do people from Maine and Chicago have to talk about? We're going to discover that today. But of course, Dwayne, what we want to always do with all of our show guests as they come on is get to know you a little bit and a little bit of your story. Love to hear a little bit about where you grew up and how did that influence your profession today?
So I grew up in Norwich, which is a little suburb on the northwest side of Chicago. And I'm Czechoslovakian and Danish. And it was a very heavily Polish and Italian neighborhood. So I stood out. I was 4 feet tall, but I still stood out. And it was kind of hard to adapt to that. But pretty early on, I would just have these ideas. And one was I consigned the toys of my friends or neighbors on the porch, on my mother's porch. And I did that when I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11, something like that, and called it the Porch Store.
Okay.
Terrible name. People would come by and ask if I could recommend a good aluminum cider or somebody to do roofing, And here I'm consigning these toys for the kids in the neighborhood. So they had, and then I've always had like these little kind of side hustles. I mean, I did a paper out for a week, and I said that's too much like work. I'd rather sell things. So I was always just kind of junking around. So as a kid, yard sales and secondhand stores and flea markets. There was a nearby flea market where there was a drive-in movie theater. Anybody remembers those? It's one of those. It was great. I mean, it's just dusty and dirty and horrible and fantastic. I'd get all excited. So it just, that kind of thing's always been in my blood. My first apartment was all the hand-me-downs from my parents' first apartment, all this 50s kitsch. And I just loved it and gravitated towards it, at a very early age. And then the whole design thing lots of other people were doing that. I had no money, so that's the best way to be a motivator. But the whole mid-century modern thing would soon follow. So I was into something that would later become popular. So I was in the right place at the right time for any number of incidents in my life.
I like that. So obviously you just gave us a great kind of background there of how you kind of got into that world of selling and antiques. But, if there was a moment or kind of a point where you just truly decided that this was the profession for you, like, can you point to that kind of moment?
Yeah. So again, I knew nothing about antiques, nothing. And I would, but there was a store in town. It was called Chicago Antique Mall. It was the first major antique mall in the city. It was on 3 floors. They had 100 dealers. And I was doing legal word processing at the time for a living and kind of shoot myself. But I would go there on the weekends and want to spend some money. And I always say, if you could stalk a store, that's what I did. Okay. I was just obsessed with it, and the things would just come and go. And I saw this last week, and now it's gone. And my little eyes lit up, going, there is something here. And I came in often enough that the owner's wife offered me a job to do their advertising, and they couldn't pay me. They had no money. And this is 3 blocks from Wrigley Field, so it's like a great location. Zillion people walking by all the time. And a lot of times it's easier to market somebody else's business than your own. I'll throw that out there. You'll go like, you should be doing this. And you guys understand and managing people's money, going like, you should really be looking at this. Where when you're doing it yourself, blinders, right?
Yeah, it's too close.
So they didn't have any money, so they offered me a booth in the basement. And anybody who's in the antique business knows you want to be in the basement. Great place to be in the basement because everybody heads downstairs for the deals. And I did not know what I was doing. And pretty quickly, I met Jeff Nelson. He was actually a dealer on the waiting list there. They had so many dealers who wanted to come in. And I said, I got to get somebody in here who kind of knows what they're doing. And he was managing a very successful mid-century modern store in Madison. He was the manager. He didn't own it. He managed it. But they were selling things to dealers in New York and LA. And I was going, that's what I want to do. And that's what you need to do. That's what we need to do. So we started with this one little booth. And in 6 months, I think we had 6 or 8 booths. And unfortunately, when that place closed, we opened up a 1,500 square foot store across the street. And then a year later, took another store and then a basement. We just kept growing till then we moved. It's the Reader's Digest version of a very long story.
So Dwayne, then maybe kind of the segue there is, so how is your business doing today? Like, how is it structured today? And then what made you decide to write a book?
So two good questions. Well, let's take the second one. I would
Mhm.
go to so many sales, and I usually were invited in either before a sale to the public or after, when these are the things that didn't sell. And I would just catch like little whiffs of stories and then going, oh my gosh, that's just incredible. This person was incredible. And how did I never hear of this person? And I would just make little notes. And not like every story was fascinating. There were 500 boring stories for everyone that was interested. So I would just take notes, and I'd say there's really, something to this, and I need to do something with it. And I'd written lots of things, but I never wrote about what I do, because I didn't really think anybody'd be all that interested, to be honest. And it turns out I was wrong. First question is, I'm sorry, was on the.
So how's your
market.
business doing today, right? So obviously
Well,
you've
really,
grown and you're
I
adding booth and booth.
I equate this to to the COVID economy. And much like restaurants, you needed to have, if you had a relationship with a bank, you might be able to get through this. And so retail, just like everybody else, we were closed for 3 months, something like that. We actually closed 2 weeks before the city made us close, because I was just obsessed with keeping everybody as safe as I could, especially my employees, but customers going, and it's being honest with you guys, I'm somebody who's lived through the AIDS years. And to me, this was like, this is an airborne plague. This is something really freaking serious. And we took it extremely seriously. And the needed to be to get through it, which on my end was take care of my people, take care of my customers, take care of my finances. So good relationship with the bank, and had to really pivot. And we were always selling online, but it was always like, 5% of our business, something like that. Gotcha. Well, I got to turn this around. I need to keep all my people.
Yeah.
Because I have all these tenants.
Right.
So we just stopped collecting rents, just not taking any of your money. And I said, let me try throwing stuff out online for you. Let's see what sales I can get for you. We started a text and take concept, which was basically, we have these like 100 feet rather of display windows. They're just amazing because we're in an old furniture store. So I piled all this stuff into the windows with the prices and the text number. And so you want to buy it? Text me it. Just text me, and we can do it over the phone. And then we had safe pickup. So everybody's masked, with.
That's great.
And that worked. That really worked. Yeah. I was encouraging other businesses at the time do this, because people be all walking around outside because it's safe, but they still want to buy something. And that was, one idea that I had. Other ideas that didn't work, but that was one idea that did work. And we have been open to that point 7 days a week since 1988. Wow. Think about that. Wow. Barring major holidays. So when this came along and then being shut down for 3 months, we said, you know what? Let's just open on weekends. So we opened very slowly, even though the public wanted it and the city said it's safe. I'm going like, I want to feel safe. Safe enough for my people and my employees. And I didn't lose one dealer, which malls were just closing, like restaurants. You're losing their help, right? Yeah. You're losing your staff. I didn't lose any employees. I'm just blessed. But I also worried about it every night going, what else can I do? And I encourage people not so much to worry, but to think. Think what else can I be doing? How crazy an idea is this? And bounce it off some people, because all you need is a couple things that work. And now we're only open 4 days a week, Wednesday through Sunday. So we're closed Monday and Tuesday. Sorry, Thursdays through Sunday. We're closed 3 days a week, open 4, and our sales are up 20%.
Wow.
Because we still have the online business. People still do the text and take. And we've kind of funneled the buyers into this time frame. Yeah. And it works because it also gives us a little time. We've been doing this a long time. We're tired. Yeah. It's kind of been a way to get through it. dealers had a somewhat time like adjusting to this because I had to change the rate, but I just made it so affordable for people. Basically, how we now run it is when they make money, we make money.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple.
Win-win. Yeah.
It's win-win. So like if you're not making money, don't stay here. I wouldn't make you stay here. And we also have no room. I've got a waiting list, which is crazy.
That's fantastic.
I mean, yeah, we're in the catbird seat, and I really would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, it's just great to hear. And obviously, talk about taking a horrible situation that we all experienced, and to, now looking back on it, obviously you said you're doing better now and you have a few days off a week. So that's just fantastic. So I want to rotate, Dwayne, into kind of the core of our show today, which is obviously helping people find that value for their stuff, right? Or how do we kind of navigate that? So certainly one theme I think with our podcast has been just facing these head-on challenges that we all have in retirement or even just life. And one thing we hear consistently with an aging population, like we have here in the United States and especially here in Maine, what are we going to do with our things? So I just want to ask you kind of to get rolling here. How should we like pre-plan our things in our wills or trusts, essentially estate planning, that will allow us to get the most value for them?
Well, first off, I'd like to encourage people to take their possessions as seriously as they do like writing a will, which means I always say, get out a notebook and write down who you want to have what. Your niece Sylvia, she's going to get the flatware. Sure. Your nephew Bill is going to get the outdoor cooker. Write it all down. Mm-hmm. Write it all down, and don't. This is key. Don't show it to anybody. Maybe your sibling, if you've got that kind of relationship. If you don't. Yeah. And now, after you're passing, they might be fighting over that cooker or the flatware. You don't care. You're dead. It doesn't matter. But if they're honoring your wishes, that's what you wanted.
Right.
Okay. So there you could just make a long a list as you possible. And why this is so good. It makes it so much easier for those that are left behind. Death is always just so difficult for everybody that's left behind. You're dead. You don't care. You're on that high road to heaven, right? Mm-hmm. But it's difficult. This is really, really difficult. So I truly encourage people to do that and pay attention to those things, that those are your requests. There's really no request that's too small. It may be difficult for your family to go and make sure that cousin Helen gets your stamp collection or whatever. It's like you want it, you need to come by the next 30 days and pick it up because she wanted you to have it. End of story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm real basic with these kinds of things. So now that's if you're preparing,
right?
And you have the time to prepare. There are situations where you don't.
Sure.
And that gets into kind of there's no one size fits all for this topic, but I love this topic and that we're talking about it because I have this conversation with customers all the time. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with fill in the blank?
Yeah.
Obviously, there are you can have estate sales in some places. If you have a home, those sometimes not in gated communities. Think about these things, right? Condos, co-ops, some of them have rules about nope. Now you still can bring in people privately, which is what I do. So through the estate, and then you're selling to a dealer, and whether you're having an estate sale or you're bringing in someone like myself or someone who does estate cleanouts, the one thing I want to say, if I say one thing today that you take with you, is that you're selling. You're actually now a salesperson. You are selling these things, and not everybody is good at that at all, especially when emotions are attached to things. So you might think you're good at it, Yeah, it might not be, because it takes a lot of patience and you need to listen. It's like, I think about if you went in to buy a car and you're getting that hard sell from Stanley to buy the Buick. You know, you're gonna, you know what? I don't like this. I want to deal with this guy. It's the same thing. And here you're trying to unload a dining room set or a kitchen set or Lord knows what. You've got to be like extra nice. You got to just put on your hat and say, I am going to be so kind and so benevolent, and I'm going to listen. And that's tough. It's really like acting, you know, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially when you're grieving. And this might sound like a little thing. It's not. It's huge. I've seen this where there's incredible things that are totally saleable, and that person who's needs to process this stuff because the mortgage is due or they're foreclosing or Lord knows what. There's always the house is on fire. There's always some reason that things have to be done yesterday. They stand in the way. Even the numbers are there. They stand in the way of it. You know, not everybody wants to hear the story about how important this bird cage was to your Aunt Elda. You know, sure. Don't. So it's just really think about, am I good at selling things? I think you have to ask yourself that and be very honest with yourself. And I'll say in the beginning, I absolutely was not.
Gotcha.
I had a couple classes at Second City and that helped a lot, but not everybody can do that.
So Dwayne, I want to jump in for a second though, because I guess the question I have, and I think the core of kind of what we're saying here is, so when the things are my things, right? So I've collected them, right? I've bought them. I've learned, I've become educated about my things. It feels like I'm probably more predisposed to get more value from my things than if I had left it to the next generation and said, hey guys, I'm past, I'm not using this anymore. You guys figure it out. So I guess from a getting value of probably I'm going to do better for the next generation if I sold them myself than if I let, you know, my son or somebody else take care of that when I'm gone. Is that a true statement in your experience? I'm going to use the John Waters word, perhaps. Okay. Only in that there are trends. And if somebody had come along 20 years ago and said, I've got 10,000 pieces of vinyl, you know, rock and roll and blah, 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 blah. I said, ugh. Yeah. Do I have to finish that story? No, you got it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. So there are trends. Trends happen. Things, especially in the antique business, things go in and out of fashion. Right. So I'd say generally, yes, you're absolutely the expert because this is what you collected, and it might be smart to either thin it out so that, you know, kind of splitting the baby in two, for lack of an analogy, the wheat from the chaff. You know, there may be the lesser things you should start thinning out and get some money for. The other thing, though, is you could sell off the entire collection. You know, don't put the money in Bitcoin. Sorry. Put the money in whatever you gentlemen would suggest. Yes. Put the money. Yeah, sure. But you get liquid is my point. Just get liquid because you're the guy who's going to know what's best about your sword collection. Right. You know? And then there's some things, unfortunately, that people bought, and you know, let's go. I can say this: Franklin Mint. You know, they were kind of taken to the cleaners to begin with, and now we're going to turn it into it's just there's going to be very, very little money if you collected Avon bottles, you know, and this is what people say. Hey, and they will think they're going to retire on it, you know. Not going to happen. So I'm agreeing with you, but it's that perhaps it really depends what it is, and that's really simple by just like looking into the marketplace. I would say you could get you can look on the eBay, obviously closed auctions, you know, for free, but buy a subscription like to WorthPoint is fantastic. WorthPoint, because that's looking at the auction results, the end auction results of what things really sold for, the real world of almost anything. And then you want to look at in point of time. Is that in the last like 3 to 5 years? Yeah. Where have the numbers been? You go, well, you know, 10, 15 years ago, these things were doing better. Are they going to come back?
depends on what it is. Native American things, yeah. Other things that are kind of, let's just say, politically incorrect, right? There's that. There's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts to what can dictate value. But you can do your own research for very, very little money, so you don't feel that some dealer's going to come in and rip you off.
Sure.
So Dwayne, I think those are really great tips. And I know we'll talk a little bit about resources in a bit, but one thing I want to ask so again, where Curtis asked a question about, hey, these are my things and I might need to pare down and get value out of them. What about the opposite situation, right? We're taking care of mom and dad's things after they pass, somebody else, a relative, and they leave all of their stuff to us, right? We're accumulating our own stuff as we age. And then now all of a sudden we have a house full of things that we have now inherited, and we're all busy, right? We have things that we want to do. And probably that was not the thing that we wanted to do, was now all of a sudden handle a house full of things that are suddenly ours. So when people come to you and they say, all right, I have this situation, how do you advise people to handle this? All right, so where do they begin? I guess is the big question.
Well, I think part of it depends on really how much stuff there is. So, I mean, there are, my partner, I generally buy furniture, which are big items, and people are happy to get rid of them. And we'll look at smalls, but smalls can just be just overwhelming. I mean, we'll look at almost anything, but so I would say it depends on the volume of it, because there are people that say, well, we have this house full, and then there's stuff in the garage, there's stuff in the basement, and did I mention we have 3 storage lockers about a mile from here?
Exactly.
Yes, you did mention that. I just kept driving. So first off, there are other firms that can do this for you. So that's something you could just pick up in the yellow pages of people who basically upscale reselling, and I always say there's we say like hoarders from the TV show Hoarders, but that's low end hoarders. But there are high end hoarders. There's people who had money and collected things, and he's got 8 grand pianos. It's like, great. The one thing I would say, which kind of just covers the waterfront, is just take photos. Take good photos, and not every little minutia of this is, he collected pens, and here's one of them. There's a pen collection. Take a couple of pictures of the pen collection. Whatever the stars of that are. So in those, always think in categories if you can. Like, well, there's a lot of art glass in this house. It can be almost anything. They like TV trays. TV, good. People buy TV trays. If you're going to, so you can bring in people individually, and why I say to have photographs is because you got to get a dealer there, and this is what people do for a living. So if somebody's going to estate sale, they will come to give you an appraisal of what they're going to charge. Right? It may seem like a lot, but they're also doing the research and trying to get you the best money for it, because they're getting a third or whatever, plus their fee. All these things are structured differently. Again, there's, like I mentioned about condos and co-ops where you can't have a sale. Then people have to be brought in privately, and I'm one of those people. But then they bring in the book guy and the lamp guy, and it just goes on, right? But the idea is to slowly get the place emptied out. And that's really I think the best way to, as far as actually making money. A lot of people get hung up when it's funny, I've been doing this so long that, I remember when, and they still talk about it, it's not really true. They'll say, oh, my kids don't want any of this stuff. It's yes and no. If your folks had a bunch of Eames chairs and sofas, they're going to be all over it. They're going to be, they'll be fighting each other over it. Or cool things from the 80s and the 90s, and there was cool things from the 80s and the 90s. I'd say almost better design. Kids are savvy. I would say kids, but younger people are savvy. They're looking, going like, wait a minute, I've seen that sofa on a TikTok video. I want that sofa. Don't throw that sofa out. So they always kind of dismiss it. Oh, the kids don't want anything. I don't find that to be. Kids are pretty smart. They may not want your mother's 112 piece collection of ugly Franciscan china, because people don't. Well, it's ugly, but people don't entertain. Young people don't entertain that way anymore.
Sure, that's right.
People don't even have a dining room, let alone
Sure.
a place for, So china cabinets are tough to sell because there's china in them and crystal. So all that kind of traditional stuff is tough. Absolutely, there are buyers for it, but it's going to be somebody in their 50s and 60s they're high-end collectors. They just have to buy it. There's a buyer for everything, but those things need to be priced sharp. And
Sure.
I learned that expression from a realtor friend of mine. I love that. Price something sharp.
All right.
Sharp is that that it's too good a deal to pass up.
Gotcha.
Because
Okay.
you just move it along. Don't fall in love with somebody else's stuff.
Okay. So Dwayne, you just kind of teed up my next question perfectly. So that was fantastic. So I want to kind of dive into estate sales for a minute. I know we've touched on them a little bit here in the last few minutes. To me, someone not the expert in the field, it does seem like the easiest way for me to just get rid of everything, right? So I know you've just expressed with condos or HOAs, for example. So what are kind of some issues that you do see with estate sales? And then what can be done to improve selling things from an estate?
I'd say, like anything else, interview a number of people, at least 3 companies.
Yeah.
Don't go with the first one. These days, everybody's got a computer in your pocket. You can go online. What are their Google reviews? What are their Facebook reviews?
Sure.
And also, I think that's really like probably the most important thing. And then the other is just kind of your gut. You might just kind of connect with somebody, and for whatever reason, that kind of mojo that's out there, and it's like they've come into your life to help you. Just following your gut on that is, I think, often underrated. So it's like, don't go with the person who just gave you the cheapest rate.
Sure.
That's not always the best way to go.
That's right.
Somebody's hit you that they were just going to be like they're the most honest with you. As opposed to like, oh, I can get you, big dollar signs. Don't be dazzled by that. I'd be more impressed with the guy who says, all that stuff in the kitchen, I get rid of all that for all the canned goods, the aluminum wrap, there's stuff in the basement. You go, yes, I've got somebody for that. It might sound silly, and it's not a lot of money, but if the place has to be emptied,
That's
right.
That's right.
And they're doing the work for you there. So, I wouldn't make a major decision on aluminum foil, but unless you're making a hat. So it's I really look into like who you're going to hire, what's most important to you. Generally, I think like if there's a vehicle involved, you should spin that off separately.
Yeah.
You might have somebody who wants to like, just throw that in and I can get you the best. Are they really a car specialist?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then you need to be honest with them too. It's like if you're showing them things, because this goes both ways. And I'll just say, let's say there's just really also some really good toys, some really good tin litho toys. We'll just pick out something, right? And of course the sale is going to be, wow, these will sell really well. I think we can get some good money on that. And fine, they're in the sale, and the estate sale people take pictures of it and post them all over the place because they want to get people to your sale. And then you, as the seller, change your mind.
Yeah.
And you pull those items.
Yeah.
It pisses off everybody. It
Yeah,
pisses off the public. They come in going, where are the tin litho toys? Now they're in a bad mood.
Yep.
Maybe they weren't even going to buy them. Maybe they just wanted to see them, but they're not going to want to buy the aluminum wrap. They're just in a bad mood. The person who's running the estate sale feels screwed. They can't do anything about it. You changed your mind. I'd be very wary of that. People do this all the time. I get it, but truly decide what you are willing to part with. No last minute, again, because inevitably the stuff ends up in a box. You end up taking it home, and 3 years later, you're calling me.
Right.
It is. Right. It is.
Yeah.
I pulled this at the sale. What'd you do that for? That was the time to sell it. Once had a guy, quick story. Once had a guy, Jeff and I sold lunch boxes like crazy before the internet craze. So, and it was a whole side business we had just with lunchboxes. So you can think of every character cartoon, Hanna-Barbera, right, with tin litho stuff. But we'd have like Lost in Space and Star Trek and really good boxes, things that you could get like lots of money for. And Jeff had a friend, you probably won't hear this, but we'll see it anyway, who had the best collection I'd ever seen. Just absolutely the best collection. And for years, I begged him, going, take out the lesser ones, give us the lesser ones, we'll consign them for you. We didn't do consignment for anybody. I wanted this collection. It was fantastic. It would augment the collection that we had. We were specialists in it, right? He wouldn't do it. And I just gave up asking. And when we were totally out of the market, not doing that anymore, on to the next thing, he decides to come along and say, okay, now you can sell it. I turned him down.
Yeah.
We turned him down. I said, it was the IRA from heaven. I mean, he would have been set. He simply would have been set. And so again, that timing of things is just so important. And I don't make the market. The market just happens, So anyway, again, don't fall in love with things.
So Dwayne, I think you're bringing up a really great point. I know you and I talked a little bit offline here about some of these, but especially from resources our listeners can use to get better educated on selling their things and figuring out what they might have a value. Because you're kind of saying like, hey, vintage 80s clothes now is the hot thing, right? And I'm going, really? Like, you're going through, your uncle's closet and he's got all this, the clothing from the 80s that he's never gotten rid of. Like, that's the stuff that I would probably just go over to Goodwill and say, take it. Because again, how can somebody find out that, hey, I just stumbled into 80s vintage clothing, which I assume is garbage. And then how would I then discover that actually has maybe not just some value, but maybe a lot of value there?
I think the easiest answer there, because it's the most relevant of websites, is Etsy.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's innumerable 80s vintage clothing sellers for both men and women. And I don't sell, but a couple of my dealers do. The one gentleman who sells just menswear, he's every once in a while, he's like, oh, I just shipped 20 ties to LA for some pilot they're doing, and they wanted all these skinny ties. So he's selling production people, which is a great contact, because once they find you, they know you're the guy and you've got the quality and your prices are good. You got a customer for life there. So this is beyond, we're all thinking, well, who's going to want this? Media wants this. Media wants this. They're a big hungry beast. And we've been propping stuff for 30 years, but I do limit everyone's. If I come across some vintage clothes, I give it to him and say, here, what's good, what isn't. But I mean, think of the 80s. Think all the shoulder pads, right? It's very much, and 80s are all about designers. And so many of the designers still, I mean, you have a Versace anything, a scarf, a belt buckle, I mean, it's sad what happened, right? But it was the same way of any kind of Warhol thing. It wasn't merchandised the same way, but all these people are, they were stars. They're stars. They're personalities. So the designers are people ask for this stuff, and we don't even have it. You can't even keep it in, actually, because it sells for better money online. So that's the other thing. I would want to say, though, I caution anyone who's in their head going, well, you know what? Then I should become an Etsy dealer, or I should become then I should sell on eBay. And I would really think that over, because then you're starting a business.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you really want to do that, fine, but you're starting a business and you need to think about what that really means. So it's not a quick short-term solution. If you just want the in and out, that's not for you.
Gotcha. That's good. That's good to know there. So I guess I have a question about questions. So if you had to answer, what questions do you wish people would ask about selling their things that maybe they typically don't even know to ask? Like, if you had a couple silver bullet here, give us the secret sauce right now. What do we got?
That's really good. Well, first is to come in prepared, which means you have photos. I don't need a 100-word description about how fantastic this hurricane lamp is. I've seen hurricane lamps. I need to see a picture of the hurricane lamp.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. Personally, I'm into we've got people come from all over the country and shop us, which is great. But I don't need somebody from Arkansas telling me that I should come out to their barn. And let's be realistic here. And because it's always you should sell in your area, or go online and find a way that you can ship it to somebody. But that's just not. That's kind of a waste of. It's a waste of both our times.
Sure.
Having that discussion, and kind of go back to do your research of what things are worth. I mean, people will come in with things and going like, I'm sorry, I don't have objects, but it's a lantern slide, and this is a box of lantern slides, like magic lantern slides. How specific is that, right? Well, I thought this was worth some money. Well, it turns out it's really not. It's really not. So don't come in and say, I got to get $75 for this, and then say I've got this in a showcase for $25, and it's been sitting here for a year and a half. Yeah. So, and I'm not being a jerk about it.
No.
I'm just saying. And a lot of people, well, mine's better. It's the same one. So often we're still talking about mass-produced items for the most part, right? Yeah. These are mass-produced items. If you can look it up online, it's a mass-produced item. Right. But yeah, I would just say being. It goes back to. I'm just going to sound like a broken record. When you're trying to sell to me, you're the seller. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be nice. And people, often they're just not nice. And I'm pretty tough. I am. I'm blunt. I put it that way. But you need to be nice because you're trying to sell something. So making me feel bad about whatever it is you're trying to sell, or you don't know what you're looking at. Actually I do, and you're kind of a dope. But and so often it's funny how people come back calling somebody a dope, but I'll just say, or I will offer somebody money on something. I say, you know what? I would do $20 on that. I'll do $20 on that. But if you can get more money elsewhere, you should take it.
Yeah.
Right. And they come back.
Yeah.
Because I was honest with them. Right. I was generally interested in it and maybe wanted to pay a little more for it, going like, that might help sell something else that's in the store.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or like as kind of a prop thing. It kind of complements it. There's lots of reasons I might buy something. Mm-hmm. I might buy something because it's Thursday and I haven't bought anything for a couple of days, And a lot of dealers are that way too, and it's walking in the door.
Yeah.
It's walking in the door. I didn't have to drive to, out into an hour into the suburbs to look at somebody's broken bicycle.
Sure.
Because it's back into the time is money. So it's being respectful of the person. I do this for a living. My favorite is, and in my new book I've got coming out at the end of the week, Vintage Confidential, and I do a chapter just of the things that people say, just the comments that people say. I don't. Wow. There's so many. Yeah. I don't want an appraisal. I just need to know what it's worth.
Ouch.
With a straight face. My mother is having an estate sale, but she doesn't know about it yet.
Oh, yeah, that's good. She doesn't know she's gonna be dead. Okay.
The other is there's like about 100 of them in there. I'm selling a coffin that was only used once. Hey. They would say these things, and I go, I got to write that down.
Yeah.
I could not come up with that on my own.
I'm just envisioning somebody like going to a cemetery, digging up a coffin and going, this is still pretty good. This one still works. This could be,
lightly used.
Exactly. I can describe this and sell it.
Actually, go ahead, please.
Well, Dwayne, I want to ask about collections, right? Because I think, all of us, and I know you've kind of said this a little bit, is we all kind of have an element of collecting things in our lives, right? And some of it's like we're collecting it not only just because maybe we have an enjoyment of it, but also we have the quote unquote, these things are going to be worth something someday. And everybody points to the Honus Wagner or the, Spider-Man #1 or whatever the thing was, where it's the first of the many. And all of a sudden that becomes worth $2.4 million at some auction. So I guess the question is, when people say that these things are going to be worth something someday, they start the collection. How do you think collections have actually performed as an investment for those that have thought along those lines?
Really good question. Excellent question. Offhand, I would say poorly.
Yeah.
Because it was, what was the motivating factor to buy it to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a bunch of strange little collections. One is a aquarium figures, vintage ceramic aquarium figures. I'm attracted to structures, I think. Right. Right. And you know what that ends up being is like a really good box lot at an auction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody will buy that and they'll probably pay some money, but not anything. And I pay almost nothing. But you know, there's just a handful of things. I shouldn't say it that way, but you know, like if I had collected pens, I go back to like what men and women collect are just so different in that. So guys, how many pairs of shoes do you have? Unless you collect gym shoes or tennis shoes,
sure.
Or right?
Yeah, a dozen, 2 dozen,
yeah, a dozen, right? Maybe about a dozen pairs of shoes.
Yeah,
you know, a woman, please. You know,
exactly.
They like shoes.
Yeah,
they like shoes. Let's not even get into it. Why they like shoes, you know? And actually, depending if she bought designer shoes. Though you got the size, which is an issue, so that limits, you know, who's going to buy it because that size thing. But guys like tie clips, tie bars, cufflinks. Guys will have hundreds of cufflinks. They don't know how many cufflinks they have, right? Now you could say both those things. Well, there are some cufflinks that actually, you know, if you're getting into gold fill and things like that, sterling better cufflinks, designer cufflinks. Those retain value. Those will absolutely be worth more than you paid for it. Same with some of the shoes. But if the guy collected pens, and that's a thing that's really consistent, it's you know, I don't know, it's what's the gold standard of stocks that you know, just something that you
blue chip stocks type thing.
Yeah. It's just. It's something that's it's really never wavered if you bought good things. Watches are like that as well, you know. So whereas I remember years ago I had Anthony Quinn came into the store and I was just mesmerized by him, and he bought every pocket knife that we had, just pocket knives. Now he liked pocket knives. There was no, you know, maybe he spent $100 in pocket knives. Other than the fact that it's going to be Anthony Quinn's pocket knife, right? Yeah. At that auction, it's really not going to be worth anything. Right. So, you know, and I go back to the vinyl thing. Like, well, who would have thought that? So there are kind of these freaky things in the market that happen, and you really can't predict, you know, what that might be, or something happens. You know, I remember years ago when they finally discovered the Titanic, you know, and then there was this huge interest in the Titanic memorabilia, right? Sure. Or not that I lived through it, but you go through it when King Tut, when they discovered the tomb in like 1922, and then there was this whole design movement that came out of it. It was just it was a huge thing. It's a huge thing. And there's still big interest in Egyptian things because of that, because of something that happened in 1922. So that's why I also really love history, because it can reflect on the market.
Yes. So Dwayne, just to kind of summarize a little bit of what I'm hearing you say, there just sounds like there's a large element of luck involved, right? It's like, because all of a sudden I happen to, you know, buy vinyl throughout the 80s and 70s and held on to it. If I sold that in the late 90s and early 2000s, everybody's going to iPods and digital music and CDs, and people like vinyl, like it's huge, it's hard. And then like now you're in the late, you know, 2010s into 2020s, and it's got a warmth to the sound, and we kind of like that, and we like it's like all of a sudden that just comes back. But if you dump that whole collection in like 2000, you probably just took a bath, but you held on to it. You might actually probably have some value 20 years, but who knew, right? Who knew?
And if someone from the future had said, listen, they're going to like the hiss.
Yeah, exactly.
They like the click and the hiss. You'd be like, go Back to the Future.
Exactly.
You're out of your mind, They're like, no, we want things to be perfect.
Yeah.
No, suddenly it's the imperfect that makes it desirable. And that people come in and say, I already have this record, but this cover's in better shape.
Yeah.
Right. Or, this one has the poster with it. Or you can get into the anally retentive of almost anything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I do actually have a guy who collects railroad lanterns, and he's the nicest guy, but I don't want to spend any more time with him because that's really all he talks about. But he has an encyclopedic mind about it.
Yeah.
Right. And he'll probably do okay with that because he really knows his stuff. And when these things go up at auction, and so I'm not laughing at him at all. It's just that there could be the most obscure thing, and I don't dismiss it anymore because there could very well be something to this.
Yeah.
But that's the definition of a market, right? Is finding a buyer to the seller. That's all that is happening, right? Because it doesn't mean you have to have all the buyers and all the sellers, but if you just find one and one that are agreeing on the price, then I think you got something.
Right. And it's that element of time.
Sure.
It's that element of time. And it also goes back to, I made some notes before, what we're talking about before is like, well, what is your purpose in this? Because when people are, and to Curtis, I'll give you this one. This is one I always forget. People don't give themselves enough time. Because I hear this it happens every weekend. Somebody comes in and say, no, you don't understand. I have to be out of the apartment in the next 15 minutes, and I'm not exaggerating it by much. And it's just like, no, these things take time. Yeah. I can do it. I can get people there, but I got even scheduling a mover. And then we're talking about like, here we are mid-COVID, right? Sure. It's still hard to get things moving. So give the potential buyer the opportunity of time. Just because you're farting around, you're going to pay for that. You're going to pay for that. The things aren't going to sell as quickly and for as much money because you didn't budget your time. So that's a good point. Yeah. So that would be my other.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up.
My other point, because it goes by very quickly, given the circumstances. The house is sold. Yep. The new people are coming in, and then their problem becomes my problem, and I have to decide if I want that problem or not.
Sure, sure, yeah.
And I think I probably speak for hundreds of thousands of dealers who would say the same thing because again, there's always more stuff to buy. This isn't like the resale market is just exploding. It's, look at that. You're running a real on TV. There's ads. You're seeing vintage everywhere. It's in everything. It's reflecting society, and for all kinds of reasons. Younger people, it's green, it's less of a footprint, it feels right to buy something vintage. Right. We've kind of moved away from that antique thing that it's got to be your Aunt Bernice's, coffee table or something. So there's a better appreciation for these things. So it's actually in a lot of ways a better time to be stuck with such a problem as it was. You have a lot more at your fingertips as far as information. But you need to be efficient with your time.
No, I like that a lot. So I want to ask you a question here that I know I am very curious about the answer here. So obviously over the length of your career, sure you've had some nightmares, seems like a tough word, but I'll say you've had some nightmares and things that you've purchased that maybe you just simply cannot sell. You can't resell it. So, do you have a couple, or do you have some items off the top of your head that you or other dealers just don't want to purchase from these types of experiences?
Good question as well. I don't deal in Black memorabilia anymore. I've got a lot of really good Black customers, and I've got a paper dealer who would have slave documents. And I remember I had a young woman come in, and she graduated from the Art Institute, and she came in with her parents, and they said, well, what do you want in the whole store? Well, we're going to buy you something. And she wanted to buy a slave document. And it meant so much to her. Yeah. And I love that story. And she's come in repeatedly and bought other things, not Black memorabilia related. but we stopped carrying that. It just became an issue. Things changed.
Sure.
Things changed. Still a market for it, absolutely. And Black people have some of the best collections of Black memorabilia. But it kind of got thrown in like with like you're selling Nazi memorabilia, and oh my gosh, no! I mean, we don't, and wouldn't, right? Yeah. So that comes to mind because a lot of times I'm explaining to people why we don't, carry it anymore. They say we used to have some really great stuff, but my definition of something objectionable isn't someone else's.
Sure.
Put it that way, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to say what that would be, but and kind of getting it. I mean, really kind of getting it, going like, that's not right. Yeah. So which that I felt actually okay about. There are things I bought which just took forever to sell. I write about a couple of those in the book. People always seem interested in just, I'm glad we're not just talking about the numbers, because the numbers kind of bore me, if I can be honest, because it's always like, what is this worth? And I'm not an appraiser. I'm just somebody with an opinion. So I think it's been more, I would just say things that I just loved. I just thought, well, this is the coolest thing, and it wasn't that I was wrong. I just might have been like a little ahead of the curve.
Yeah, sure.
Timing,
which I tend to do. So I was buying Carnival Banners back in the day, and some people found those offensive. And now I wish I kept them because I knew they were fantastic. And I ended up like selling almost the entire collection to one other dealer. He came along and I said, but it was, that they were sideshow performers, and the banner art for it, again, kind of politically incorrect. Sure. Depending upon it's a little person. Yeah. Not the M word.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like little minefields, here and there. But again, I recognize I'm selling history, and history's complicated, and history's changing before our eyes.
That's right. So, and it's being rethought and reimagined and all that. Well, Dwayne, I want to ask then the flip side of that question, right? Because you've talked about some nightmares of things that really just can't sell. What are some things that people are surprised to find they're able to get some value out of, right? So things that they had assumed to be in the garbage pile, but actually are very saleable. I know we talked 80s vintage clothing a little bit. What sort of things that are you kind of in today's world that you're seeing just kind of like, wow, like people are really not anticipating that they would get money out of?
Well, I'm 63. I'll throw that out there.
Okay.
Right. So it'll be like Burger King glasses, oh yeah. I'd say a lot of the collectible stuff that was free, the McDonald's, a lot of the collectible stuff, and that just flies out the door. It's affordable, and it's got Chewbacca on it, and it's 1988 or whatever. I get it. So that always, I guess, I find that kind of amusing. Once pot was legalized here, I don't know what's going on in your state.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah. So and then suddenly it's like you can't keep a lighter in the shop. And ashtrays, people asking for ashtrays all the time. I need an ashtray. I need a Las Vegas ashtray. Suddenly it's, and I'm always like, you should get one from a hotel that doesn't exist anymore. That's to me, that's cool. Like, no. I want one that my parents stayed at or whatever. So, and a lot of this tends to be kind of kitschy, let's just say collectible, trash with a small t. So, because it would be things that you would throw out, generally, even down to like, oh my gosh, packaging, just packaging, even not all that early packaging, but so from food containers, especially when you had all the sports figures on there and
Michael Jordan's and stuff.
Not the same thing, but we were selling when Pee Wee was hot. And we had the show, and things would sell for insane money. I mean, just insane money. And then of course it all collapsed, like overnight. Yeah. And I remember hearing, I had one of my dealers, she went, this is great. This is how smart people can be. She sees this happen. She tracked down back then there were Toys R Us stores. Toys R Us stores, right? She tracked down all the Toys R Us stores, and she would wait for them to throw out their garbage because they just cleared out the shelves. They just dumped it all. And I remember her coming in with a van full. And how could you have possibly, what? So she gets it for free. Yeah. It was brilliant. Yeah. She made thousands and thousands of dollars. We sold every darn, cherry and you name it. Because then it was over. Then it was really over, and now there's a little more, there's someone interested in Pee Wee online, but again, something happens right in the ether of collectability. So that one kind of surprised me because it had an arc. I don't know if that scratches.
That's
awesome.
Great
Examples.
So Dwayne, we've kind of reached the concluding question of our show here, and it's not directly related to the topic. I'm guessing it will be maybe in your answer, but so obviously we're here on the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. So one question I love to ask all of our guests is, how will you define your own retirement success when you get there?
Chaos.
Hey, I like
That's
that.
the best answer I've heard.
I don't know that we've ever had that, and I like that.
I gotta hear the follow-up of what chaos really means in retirement success.
Because it still comes back to I'm coining high-end hoarder because I'm a high-end hoarder, and many dealers are. It's very hard to retire from the antique business. I know a lot of retired antique dealers that are still selling online or have a booth in an antique mall. I go, well, how are you retired? How did you really? Very few people can draw that line. And my partner and I have been talking about it. Do we downsize the retail end of it? Do we kind of just take a break from it? Do we? But the thing is, the calls keep coming, the emails keep coming. I'm doing a wonderful show like this. And people reach out. That was another reason that I did the book. I thought it shows the backstory of this business. And I thought when I first looked into this, I could only find a book that was written in the 70s by some English guy about what it was like to be an antique dealer. And I was like, really? Because dealers have all these stories. Everybody's got some great stories. Yeah. And I've been, so I thought, well, I can, relate them here and into a second book because the first book hit. But I'm still going to say chaos because there's just so much to do. I think this is going to be, and I'll do this here where I'm looking around at some of my art here. I think art will probably go to auctions, some of the better, ephemera auctions for the books and things like that when I downsize of these things. I think a lot of stuff will probably go to auctions, and then a lot of just lesser stuff. I have my own McDonald's glasses that I drink have coffee from every morning. So going like, hey, that's still worth $10. But I'm hoping that I won't be as married to it as I have been. That will be time for it to go on. And this is what I like about the business. I get emails or I see Facebook posts and people say, look at this, all this stuff came from your shop, and they're so happy with it. And it's touching people's lives in a very direct way. And I never thought I would have that opportunity. So I think my things can go on and make somebody happy.
Love
Well,
that.
Dwayne, that's a fantastic answer, and I really can't thank you enough for coming on our show, because there's just so much in terms of the fascinating stories from your book, and I know you got a book coming out of Vintage Confidential Retro Rattled Tales Tattled as well, that's coming out here next week, as you said.
Yeah.
There's so much here, I think, from our client stories and having these challenges that they're facing, and you being able to kind of give some tips and hacks and tricks to how to get all this stuff done. This is going to be really helpful for years to come for all of our clients and listeners to our show. So we really appreciate that. And maybe at some point we can have you come back on, because I think there's probably going to be another echo of things that might happen from the pandemic. So I think that might be another fascinating follow-up. So love to have you back on at some point, but really can't thank you enough. This has been fun.
It's been great. Thanks, guys.
Take care. So really fun episode here today, having Duane Scott Cerny on. What a character. Has, I'll say, a lot of stories, a lot of adventures there with antiques. And
a lot of stuff.
Selling stuff.
Yeah.
Again, his book is Selling Dead People's Things. If you come up with that title, I think you got a sense of humor.
That's right.
In his next book is Vintage Confidential Retro Rattled Tales Tattled, and that's coming out, I think, probably by the time we're published it should be out. So
I believe so. Yeah.
So check that out on Amazon as well. But as you know, we always try to wrap up our show and do a little bit of things that we took away personally from it. So Curtis, what was something that you took away from today's episode?
Yeah, so I'm going to be lazy here a little bit, and I'm going to use Dwayne's takeaway. So early in the conversation, he referenced that he had one key point that he wanted our listeners to take away. So I'll reemphasize that. And kind of the punchline is the person dealing with the estate or the leftover items, we are the salesperson. So, I think it's important that he pointed that out, because it's something that maybe we don't do every day. He talked about how you have to kind of look yourself in the mirror and say, is that something you're good at? Is that something you think you can do? Because there's people like Dwayne or people in the industry that can help you, that, if you need to seek help to really accomplish your goals of selling or just getting rid of kind of whatever's left in these estate type situations. So I just wanted to echo that from Dwayne, and just, if you're a salesman, go for it. But, I know I myself probably wouldn't do well, certainly, even if you are a salesman, probably not in that field. So, I think it's important to kind of assess yourself there and seek the resources that Dwayne highlighted.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I know, just kind of from my personal experience working with this, and then also, professionally, as our clients have been working through relatives and folks that have passed away and having to deal with it. It comes down to really kind of three things. One is speed, right? You're going through a grieving process anyway, and then you're left with these things. And the more you look at the things, I think, and the more it's reminding you of the grieving process you're going through. So I think speed tends to be something that I think the more speed we approach with it, because we're dealing with our emotions about the person that we lost, might be a little bit more inverse to the value that we get, right? Which I think he was making the point of getting appraisals and finding the right buyers out there. Versus let's just throw this stuff on the lawn, and on a Saturday we got to get rid of everything.
That's right.
You're probably not going to get the value. So I think kind of, how do I get the most out of it? Speed.
So time was a big one he talked about. I know when I asked him for kind of the secret sauce, he said, just give yourself time. And like you said, Ben, it's natural to want to probably get through it as fast as you can. But if that goal is value, then that may not help.
So those are the competing forces, right? It feels like is, hey, I'm trying to get through it as quick as I can, but also I want to make sure I get the most value out of it. So I think from an episode today, I think Dwayne did a really great job of walking through the intricacies of those two things, right? As he said, like, hey, one person could take care of everything and maybe do it, but are they like a car dealer? Do they really know how to handle a car sale? Is that the best person to probably do? So people that are going to have their their niche out there and what they work with and what they deal with on a daily basis. It's just important to assess that and see how quickly they can get it done, but also how much value they can provide. So I thought that was a really kind of good kind of back and forth in terms of debate to kind of think through for today's episode. Yeah. So of course we will have some more resources, including how to check out Dwayne's books. Yeah. And in kind of some more about today's show, you can go to blog.guidancepointllc.com/66, because we're episode 66.
That's right.
And you can see more about our show there. Again, we always appreciate you tuning in. We're 66 in now. We've been getting better every time. I think our guests continue to provide a lot of value about things that we work through in retirement. Mm-hmm. We really appreciate you tuning into our show and can't wait to catch you next time. Take care.